Lauren Underwood didn't just show up to a congressional hearing. She came armed with the Constitution and the confidence of someone who knew exactly what was at stake. What unfolded wasn't just a tense exchange between a lawmaker and a cabinet official. It was a direct confrontation with the very idea of executive power, a showdown that turned a routine oversight hearing into a battle over democracy itself. And it left Secretary Kristi Noem struggling to defend what many are calling indefensible. It began with a simple but loaded question. Underwood asked whether the administration believed it could unilaterally withhold funds already approved by Congress. At first, Noem tried to spin the situation as a matter of evaluation.
I'm going to hold off on my questions until the members have got done to see if some of them are duplicative. And so, Ms. Underwood, the floor is yours for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This weekend, the president made the remarkable statement that he, quote, doesn't know whether he has to uphold the Constitution. You, however, have taken a different position, both in your confirmation hearing and when you took the oath of office. You said that you were committed to complying with the Constitution. Do you still stand by that statement?
Absolutely. I believe President Trump
Excellent.
as well.
Let's start with Article 1, which gives Congress and only Congress the power of the purse. No money shall be drawn from the Treasury, but in consequence of appropriations made by law. But this administration is freezing, terminating, and even clawing back federal grants and awards that were already signed into law. These are taxpayer dollars that were appropriated by Congress for the specific purposes that we laid out. So, Secretary, let me ask you, do you believe the administration has the authority to subvert appropriations law to freeze and terminate congressional funding?
The administration and the Department of Homeland Security used our authorities that we have to evaluate every grant that was in front of us and meet statutory requirements, but also to make sure that they were being spent appropriate.
So, of course, the president is within his authorities.
Make sure that
ma'am, this
we
is
went
my time.
forward.
Thank you so much. Of course, the president's within his authorities to drive policy decisions within the bounds of federal law and the Constitution, but that's not what you've been doing. What I'm asking is whether you believe you have the authority to ignore appropriations law. Do you believe that the Constitution gives the executive branch unilateral authority to withhold funds appropriated by the legislative branch?
We have evaluated grants to make sure if they're being spent appropriately, and work that is underway and was authorized has continued. Other grants that have not been started and have not been authorized or obligated, we have reevaluated. And I think you're talking specifically about grants potentially within FEMA that were non-disaster related grants.
I'm talking
Those
broadly, ma'am,
programs are
and
being-
Article 2 does not give the executive the authority to withhold funds, period. And multiple courts have weighed in to agree. Multiple courts have ruled in agreement. Congress controls the power of the purse. That is a fact. That's not a question. That is a fact. And so if the president disagrees with certain spending, Congress passed the Impoundment Act to create a legal process to seek rescissions, and we expect him to follow the law. This administration is not just ignoring the constitutional power of the people's elected representatives. It is also violating the fundamental right of individuals. Do you believe that the Constitution grants everyone in our country the right to due process, including non-citizens?
The administration has the authority to.
Ma'am, I'm
look
looking
at
for a
how
yes or
grants are
no
spent and
question.
to
Yes or no? Do you believe the
reappropriate them
Constitution?
as
Yes,
appropriate.
ma'am. Do you,
We have
ma'am?
not conducted in
Reclaiming
any
my
kind
time,
of
Mr.
impoundment.
Chairman.
Time is yours.
Okay, Secretary Noem, I'm just looking for a yes or no here. Do you believe the Constitution guarantees due process to everyone in America?
Due process is exactly what this Congress
Yes
lays out.
or
that
no?
it is, and
Okay,
the
ma'am,
tools
I'll
that
take
you
that as
give
a
us
no.
on due process
Excuse me,
is
I'm
afforded to you.
ma'am, I'm trying to ascertain your understanding of the law as it applies to your department, and you as its leader should be able to give us a yes or no answer, because judge after judge has ruled that the law is not being followed. Do you believe that the U.S. government has the authority to deport American citizens?
No, and we are not deporting
great.
U.S. citizens.
I'm so happy to hear that you do not believe that the law gives you that authority, because the federal government has no authority under U.S. laws to deport any American citizen. And as I know, everyone viewing this hearing today knows that several American citizens have been deported to
haven't.
date.
That is not
Secretary
true.
Noem, that was not a question. Secretary Noem, that oath that we both swore before taking office was to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States, not the president, not a political party, the Constitution. And that's what we're going to keep doing here at the Appropriations Committee. Thank you. I yield back.
claiming her department was simply making sure money was being spent appropriately. But Underwood wasn't buying it. She cut in, sharp and unwavering. That was not a question. The room froze. She wasn't there to let vague language slide. She wanted clarity, and she demanded it with surgical precision. But the moment wasn't just about one tense exchange. It went deeper, right into the heart of the Constitution. At stake was something called the power of the purse. Article 1 makes it crystal clear. Congress, and only Congress, decides how taxpayer money is spent. Not the president, not cabinet officials. Congress. That authority isn't negotiable, and it isn't subject to interpretation. Yet here was an administration freezing grants, clawing back funds, and terminating awards that had already been signed into law. For the people watching, this wasn't abstract. These were real dollars meant for disaster recovery, education, public health, and law enforcement. When those funds disappear, communities suffer. Underwood laid it out plainly. This wasn't about policy disagreements or political differences. It was about legality. When money is withheld because an administration doesn't like how Congress decided to spend it, that's not governance. That's lawbreaking. And she had the receipts. Court rulings backing Congress's power, the text of the Constitution itself, and decades of precedent. She pressed again. Did Noem believe the executive branch had the authority to ignore appropriations law? Noem dodged, pivoted, and tried to hide behind bureaucratic language. But the truth was written right there in black and white. Congress controls the purse. Period. But that wasn't the whole story. Underwood wasn't finished. She moved to another cornerstone of American democracy, due process. She asked Noem a direct yes or no question. Does the Constitution guarantee due process to everyone in America, including non-citizens? It should have been a straightforward answer. Courts have ruled on it time and again. The principle is clear. Yet Noem hesitated, stumbled, and tried to twist the answer into a vague defense of administrative authority. That's when Underwood pressed harder, reminding her that every judge who's looked at this issue has ruled the same way. The law isn't being followed. And then came the moment that would reverberate far beyond the walls of that committee room. Underwood asked point blank, does the U.S. government have the authority to deport American citizens? Noem answered no. But Underwood wasn't about to let the denial slide without context. She pointed to the evidence, multiple reports of U.S. citizens being deported under the administration's watch. Families separated, lives upended, rights shredded. These weren't clerical errors. These were constitutional violations. And they showed, in the starkest terms, the dangers of unchecked executive power. For viewers, the message was clear. If a government official cannot give a simple yes when asked whether the Constitution protects everyone's rights, that's a warning sign. If citizens can be deported by mistake and the administration shrugs it off, that's a constitutional crisis. And if funds already allocated by law can be frozen because of political convenience, then what's safe? Social security? Voting rights? Education funding in your community? The stakes weren't theoretical anymore. They were painfully real. Underwood drove home that point with force. She reminded the committee, and everyone watching, that both she and Noem had sworn an oath. Not to a president, not to a political party, to the Constitution. That oath is supposed to mean something. It's the foundation of trust in government. Break it, and you break faith with the American people. Underwood wasn't just defending legal theory. She was defending the principle that the law applies to everyone, even those in power. This is why oversight matters. Hearings like this aren't sideshows or political theater. They're the last line of defense when an administration treats Congress like an inconvenience, the courts like a speed bump, and the Constitution like a suggestion. And in that hearing, Underwood reminded everyone why checks and balances exist. Because without them, power doesn't just grow. It corrupts. It reaches into every part of life, from the money meant to rebuild communities after a disaster, to the rights of immigrants, to the citizenship of your neighbors. What Underwood exposed wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a pattern of executive overreach, of dodging accountability, of bending rules until they broke. And she showed what accountability looks like when someone refuses to be silenced. When she cut off Noem's attempts to dodge with "this is my time," it wasn't just about reclaiming seconds on the clock. It was about reclaiming authority for Congress, for voters, and for the Constitution itself. And that's the bigger lesson here. Democracy doesn't erode all at once. It crumbles piece by piece when leaders sidestep laws, when rights are denied, and when silence becomes the norm. But it also strengthens piece by piece when lawmakers push back, when citizens demand answers, and when accountability refuses to fade. Underwood's fiery exchange wasn't just a headline. It was a warning and a call to action, because today it was FEMA grants. Tomorrow it could be Medicare, voting rights, or local school funding. If executive power can override Congress in one case, it sets a precedent for more. And if due process isn't protected for everyone, then eventually it's not protected for anyone. That's not fear-mongering. That's history. And Underwood made sure everyone watching knew it. Oh, where does that leave us? It leaves us with a choice. Pay attention. Speak up. Demand answers. Democracy doesn't survive on autopilot. It survives because people fight for it, piece by piece, hearing by hearing, vote by vote. Underwood showed what that fight looks like in real time. And now, it's on us to decide if we'll stand by and watch or step in and act. If you're frustrated by what you've heard, you're not alone. If you're wondering how we reached a point where officials dodge basic questions about the law, you're asking the right questions. And if you believe, like Lauren Underwood, that the Constitution should be honored, not ignored, then now is the moment to get engaged. Share this story. Talk about it. Comment below with your thoughts. Let your representatives know you're watching. Because when the people are silent, power fills the void. But when the people speak up, no administration, no official, no overreach can ignore them forever. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Because this fight isn't ending anytime soon. We're going to keep exposing these moments, breaking them down, and making sure the truth stays louder than the spin. Because in the end, democracy only survives when the people defend it. And after what we just witnessed, that defense has never been more urgent.